Oh, yeah. There were some he loved, some he hated, some he didn't want to do, some he had fun with, but Elvis was a perfectionist.
Tennessee that has never really belonged to the living. From the moment Elvis Presley drove through those music note gates for the first time in 1957, Graceland became something that existed outside the normal rules of ownership. It wasn't just a home, it was a confession, a 13.8-acre declaration that a poor boy from Tupelo, Mississippi had survived long enough to build something that would outlast him. And outlast him it did. Because when Elvis died on August 16, 1977, collapsed on a bathroom floor at just 42 years old, Graceland didn't die with him. It waited, it held its breath, and then it became the most contested piece of real estate in American music history. What most people don't know, what the tourist brochures and the candlelit vigils never tell you, is that Elvis didn't leave behind a dynasty when he died. He left behind debt, somewhere in the region of $5 million of it. The king of rock and roll, the man who had sold out stadiums and moved more records than almost any artist in human history, died financially hemorrhaging. The mansion, the cars, the jumpsuits, the spectacle, all of it was built on a financial foundation that was quietly crumbling long before his body gave out. And when the dust settled, there was really only one person who stepped into that wreckage and decided to build something from it. That person was Priscilla Presley. She was Elvis's ex-wife by the time he died. They had divorced in 1973, 4 years before his death, and whatever love story they had shared had long since been replaced by something more complicated. The kind of relationship that doesn't have a clean name. But Priscilla didn't walk away from Graceland when Elvis died. She walked toward it. She opened it to the public in 1982, a decision that many people thought was exploitative at the time, and that history has since proven to be nothing short of visionary. She turned a grief-soaked mansion into a cultural institution. She built the Graceland brand from the foundation up, negotiating licensing deals, managing Elvis's image rights, and transforming what had been a symbol of excess and tragedy into a machine that today generates hundreds of millions of dollars and welcomes over 600,000 visitors every single year. Whatever else you want to say about Priscilla Presley, you cannot say she didn't earn her place in that story. But here's where the story stops being about the past and starts being about something far more dangerous. Because Graceland was never just a business. It was also a home. Specifically, it was the inheritance of Lisa Marie Presley, Elvis's only child, the little girl who had been in that house when her father died, who had grown up in the shadow of a legend so large it swallowed ordinary life whole. Lisa Marie inherited Graceland outright when she turned 25 in 1993, and for years the arrangement worked, more or less. Priscilla remained involved. The estate kept growing. The family, complicated as it was, held together around the gravity of Elvis's name. And then, on January 12, 2023, Lisa Marie Presley died of cardiac arrest at 54 years old, and everything that had been quietly holding together came completely apart. Lisa Marie's death didn't just orphan her children. It detonated a legal, financial, and deeply personal war over one of the most valuable celebrity estates on Earth. At the center of that war stood two women whose relationship had once been defined by shared grief, and now was being defined by something far uglier. On one side was Riley Keough, Lisa Marie's eldest daughter, Elvis's granddaughter, a 33-year-old woman who had just watched her mother be buried, while simultaneously discovering she was about to be dragged into the fight of her life. On the other side was Priscilla Presley, grandmother, matriarch, the woman who had literally saved Graceland from financial ruin, now filing legal challenges against her own granddaughter within weeks of her daughter's funeral. Let that land for a second. Lisa Marie's body was barely cold. Riley Keough is not a name that has always lived in bright lights. She had built a quiet, respected career as an actress. You may know her from Daisy Jones and the Six, or from Mad Max, Fury Road. But she had largely stayed out of the Presley mythology, content to live her life at a careful distance from the weight of that name. Then her brother Benjamin died by suicide in 2020. Then her mother died in 2023. And suddenly, Riley wasn't at a careful distance from anything. She was standing in the middle of it, holding documents and grief in equal measure, being asked to defend her right to the inheritance her mother had. Specifically, deliberately, and legally left to her. What was actually at stake? What were these two women really fighting over? These estimates vary depending on who you ask and which assets you count, but conservative figures put the value of the Presley estate, Graceland included, somewhere between $35 and $100 million. Some analysts go higher, and that's before you factor in the ongoing revenue, the tourism, the licensing, the image rights, the merchandise, the cultural immortality of Elvis Presley's name, which shows absolutely no sign of fading more than four decades after his death. Before we talk about who won this war, we need to talk about what was actually at stake in every possible sense of those words, legally, emotionally, and historically. Because the number will shock you, and so will the lengths people were willing to go to claim it. In the world of estate law, the document that matters most is rarely the one that gets written first. It's the one that gets written last. And in the case of Lisa Marie Presley's estate, the document that changed everything wasn't her original trust. It was an amendment. A single, quietly executed amendment signed in 2010 that rewrote the entire future of Graceland without anyone outside of Lisa Marie's inner circle even knowing it existed, until she died. Until it became the most controversial piece of paper in the entire Presley saga. Here's what that amendment said in plain terms. Lisa Marie's original trust had named Priscilla Presley and her former business manager Barry Siegel as co-trustees, the people who would oversee and manage her estate when she was gone. The 2010 amendment removed both of them entirely. In their place, Lisa Marie named her two children, her son Benjamin Keough and her daughter Riley Keough. That was it. No long explanation. No public announcement. Just a quiet, deliberate legal decision that stripped two powerful people of their roles and handed the keys to the next generation. Lisa Marie made that choice 13 years before she died. She had more than a decade to change her mind. She never did. When Priscilla Presley discovered the contents of that amendment in the days following Lisa Marie's death, she didn't grieve quietly. She filed. Within weeks of her daughter's funeral, and let that timeline sit with you, because it matters. Priscilla submitted a legal challenge to the Los Angeles Superior Court, arguing that the 2010 amendment was invalid. Her argument wasn't subtle. She claimed the notarization on the document was fatally flawed. The signature, she alleged, didn't match Lisa Marie's known handwriting. The address listed on the notarization was incorrect. And by extension, Priscilla's legal team suggested that the amendment may not have reflected Lisa Marie's true wishes at all. That something or someone had compromised the integrity of that document. What she was really saying, if you read between the legal language, was this: my daughter didn't really mean to cut me out, and I'm not going to let a piece of paper say otherwise. Now, on its surface, a concern about document integrity sounds legitimate. Notarization exists precisely to protect people from forged or coerced paperwork. But here is where the story shifts. Because while Priscilla was publicly positioning herself as a mother trying to honor her daughter's true intentions, a separate and deeply troubling development was unfolding in the background. One that painted a very different picture of what was actually at stake in this dispute. A company called Nausini Investments and Private Lending emerged with a claim that should have been impossible. They alleged that Lisa Marie Presley had before her death taken out a $3.8 million loan against Graceland itself, and that since the loan had not been repaid, they were entitled to foreclose on the property. They set a foreclosure auction date. They sent formal notices. For a moment, it appeared that Graceland, the most sacred piece of ground in rock and roll history, could be sold off to satisfy a debt that, upon closer investigation, appeared to be entirely fraudulent. Lisa Marie's signature on the loan documents was, by multiple analyses, a forgery. The company's principals could not be clearly identified. The entire scheme had the fingerprints of a calculated predatory fraud designed to exploit the chaos of a fresh estate dispute, sometimes through charm, sometimes through financial leverage, reminding Elvis of how deeply their business affairs had become entangled, how much disruption a split would cause, how much Elvis stood to lose in the short term if he walked away. And sometimes, according to people who witnessed these moments, through something that looked uncomfortably close to emotional manipulation. Parker knew exactly which levers to pull. He had spent decades installing them. The codependency had grown so total, so structurally embedded in every aspect of Elvis's professional life, that even when Elvis saw the bars of his cage clearly, and there were moments when he saw them, he couldn't bring himself to walk out. Because Parker hadn't just managed Elvis's career. He had made himself load-bearing. He had positioned himself so deeply inside the architecture of everything Elvis had built that removing him felt, at least from inside the situation, like it might bring the whole structure down. That's not an accident. That's the most sophisticated form of control there is. The kind where the person being controlled genuinely cannot tell where the control ends and their own choices begin. Then, Elvis died. There were conversations happening in the weeks and months after his death, among family members. Among members of his inner circle, that reflected a quiet but persistent discomfort with the conclusions they had been handed. A feeling that something hadn't been fully examined. A feeling that the investigation had been, in some unspoken way, guided toward a particular destination rather than allowed to arrive at one naturally. And then there were the records themselves. The sealed files. The restricted access. The documentation that should have been a matter of public medical record in a high-profile death investigation, but instead became something that required legal navigation just to approach. Families of ordinary people don't seal medical records after a sudden death. Coroners' offices don't routinely restrict access to findings in cases where the conclusion is clean and uncomplicated. Sealing happens when there is something to protect. The only question, the question this video is going to spend the next several minutes answering, is what exactly needed protecting, and who needed it protected from. Because what emerged in the years after Elvis's death, slowly, through investigative reporting and independent forensic review and the testimony of people who were inside that investigation, painted a picture that looked almost nothing like the one the public had been given. A picture that involved not just the drugs in his system, but the people who put them there, the institutions that looked away, and the documents that were quietly ensured would never tell the full story on their own. The toxicology report, the prescription records, the sealed communications. They were all pointing somewhere. And the official conclusion, delivered before the evidence was complete, was designed to make sure nobody followed the direction they were pointing. That story starts right now. When the full toxicology results finally came back, they didn't whisper. They screamed. And the people who were supposed to be listening, the officials, the gatekeepers, the medical authority figures entrusted with delivering the truth to the public, chose, in that moment, to turn the volume down. What the Baptist Memorial Hospital laboratory found inside Elvis Presley's body was not the profile of a man who died from a heart that simply stopped. It was the chemical portrait of a system that had been pushed, medicated, and overwhelmed to a degree that most physicians today describe as staggering. More than 90% of the people watching this video right now still aren't subscribed. And that means most people are missing out on exclusive, untold stories about Elvis Presley you won't find anywhere else. If you don't want to miss the next revelation, now's the time. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share this video with one friend. Now, let's continue. There is a particular kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a press conference or a carefully worded statement released through a publicist. It shows up quietly in courtrooms and legal briefs and notarized documents, in the willingness to keep standing when everything around you is designed to make you sit down. That is the kind of strength Riley Keough showed in the months following her mother's death. And if you weren't paying close attention, you almost missed it entirely. Consider what Riley was carrying when all of this began. In July of 2020, her brother Benjamin Keough, her closest sibling, the boy who had grown up alongside her inside the strange and suffocating gravity of the Presley name, died by suicide at 27 years old. Lisa Marie Presley never fully recovered from that loss. By multiple accounts, Benjamin's death broke something in Lisa Marie that simply could not be repaired. Riley watched her mother grieve in a way that had no bottom. And then, 2.5 years later, she watched her mother die. She stood at that funeral. She delivered a eulogy that made an entire room of people weep. She held herself together in public with a composure that must have cost her enormously. And then she walked out of that memorial service and directly into a legal war. This is the context that never makes it into the headlines. The human weight of what Riley Keough was asked to carry, before a single court document was filed, before a single argument was made, before she ever had to become anything other than a daughter in mourning. Lisa Marie Presley was 9 years old when her father died. 9 years old. And she didn't just lose him the way a child loses a parent to illness or accident. She lost him inside the house she lived in, on a floor she walked every day, in a room she passed every morning on her way to her own bedroom. Most children who lose a parent are separated from the place of that loss. They grieve at a distance. Lisa Marie had to keep living inside it. She had to keep walking that hallway, passing that bathroom door, existing in the same physical space where the most catastrophic moment of her young life had occurred. And then, when she was old enough to understand what the world had built around her father's name, she had to decide what to do with all of it. At age 25, under the terms of Elvis's will, Lisa Marie Presley inherited the entirety of the Graceland estate. What she received was not the gleaming gold record-lined monument to American success that the public imagined. What she received was a property hemorrhaging money, a father's name attached to a brand that had been mismanaged into near bankruptcy, and a collection of rooms upstairs that no estate lawyer or financial advisor could assign a dollar value to, because their value wasn't financial. It was entirely, devastatingly personal. The people around her told her the hard truth quickly. To survive, to keep Graceland, to honor her father's name in any meaningful way, she would have to commercialize it. She would have to open the doors and sell the experience and build the enterprise. And she did. She sold 85% of Elvis Presley Enterprises and watched the operation transform into the commercial giant it is today, complete with the hotel complex and the arena and the gift shops and the hot sauce. But she kept one thing for herself. She drew the line at the top of the staircase, and she held it there, year after year, regardless of what the balance sheet said or what the business advisors recommended. And the reason she held that line becomes painfully clear when you understand what the years between inheriting Graceland and losing Graceland actually looked like for Lisa Marie Presley. By 2018, the financial reality of her life had become a crisis that shocked even the people who thought they knew her situation. Reports emerged that Lisa Marie had lost nearly all of the $100 million she had received from the sale of Elvis Presley Enterprises. The money had moved through failed business ventures, personal expenses, and, according to her own legal filings, the catastrophic mismanagement by people she had trusted. She was, by multiple documented accounts, carrying millions of dollars in debt. Graceland was her last significant asset. And in the conversations that followed, the urgent, uncomfortable conversations about how to stabilize her financial situation, the upstairs came up. It had to. If you're looking at Graceland as a revenue source and you're running out of options, eventually someone in that room points at the one part of the property nobody has ever been allowed to monetize and asks the obvious question. Lisa Marie's answer was no. Reportedly, clearly, and without significant deliberation, no. And what makes that answer remarkable isn't the financial sacrifice it represented, though that sacrifice was real. What makes it remarkable is the reason behind it. Because upstairs wasn't just where her father died. Upstairs was where she remembered him alive. Her bedroom was up there. The room where Elvis would come and sit on the edge of her bed and talk to her in the middle of the night. Because he kept the same hours she was supposed to be sleeping through. The hallway was up there where she would hear his voice and follow the sound of it and find him in some room or another, restless and luminous and entirely hers in those private hours before the world woke up and claimed him again. To open those rooms to strangers, to people with ticket stubs and smartphone cameras who wanted a piece of the king, would have been, to Lisa Marie, an act of desecration so profound she couldn't frame it any other way. She had spent her entire life watching the world consume her father, watching his image get stretched across merchandise and movies and tribute concerts and tabloid headlines until the actual human being she had known, the man who sat on the edge of her bed, the man who smelled like a specific cologne she never forgot, the man who was funny and frightened and larger than life and completely lost all at the same time, was buried so deep under the legend that even she sometimes had to fight to remember him clearly. The upstairs was the one place the legend hadn't fully reached. It was the one place where he was still just her father. And she was not going to sell that. Not for any amount of money. Not under any circumstances. And then, on January 12th, 2023, Lisa Marie Presley died of a small bowel obstruction at the age of 54. She was buried in the meditation garden at Graceland, beside her father, beside her son Benjamin, who had taken his own life in 2020 at age 27. The woman who had spent 3 decades standing guard at the top of that staircase, who had absorbed every financial crisis and every outside pressure and every well-meaning suggestion that the rooms could be opened tastefully, respectfully, carefully, was gone. The key she had been holding for 30 years was now in someone else's hands. And the question of what that someone else would do with it was about to become one of the most emotionally charged decisions in the history of American music. When Lisa Marie Presley died, the legal machinery that surrounds a estate of that magnitude moved quickly and brutally. What followed was not a quiet, dignified transfer of responsibility from mother to daughter. What followed was a public legal battle that exposed just how contested, how complicated, and how emotionally raw the question of Graceland's future truly was. At the center of that battle stood 2 women from the same bloodline, carrying the same grief, and seeing the future of Elvis Presley's home in 2 completely different ways. Priscilla Presley, Elvis's ex-wife, Lisa Marie's mother, and the woman who had arguably done more than anyone alive to build the Graceland empire into what it is today, emerged to contest the terms of the estate trust. Her position, legally speaking, centered on amendments to the trust document that she argued had been made without proper authorization. More than 90% of the people watching this video right now still aren't subscribed, and that means most people are missing out on exclusive, untold stories about Elvis Presley you won't find anywhere else. If you don't want to miss the next revelation, now's the time. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share this video with one friend. Now let's continue. The allegations were serious. The word forgery entered the conversation. And suddenly the fate of the most famous private residence in American music history was being argued in courtrooms and legal filings while the world watched, and the meditation garden held 3 generations of the same broken, luminous, impossible family. The settlement, when it came, placed control of Graceland firmly in the hands of Riley Keough, Lisa Marie's eldest daughter, Elvis's granddaughter, and a woman who had already absorbed more loss by her mid-30s than most people encounter in a lifetime. Riley had watched her grandfather be mythologized from the moment she was old enough to understand who he was. She had watched her mother fight to protect his humanity for 30 years. She had stood at her brother Benjamin's graveside in 2020, and then stood at her mother's graveside less than 3 years later. And now, she stood at the top of a staircase that her family had been guarding for nearly 5 decades, and inherited the weight of the decision that came with it. Riley Keough does not court the spotlight. She is, by every public account and every interview she has given, a deeply private person who approaches her family's legacy with a protectiveness that feels less like brand management and more like self-preservation. She has spoken carefully and sparingly about Graceland, about her grandfather, about what it means to carry this particular inheritance. And in everything she has said and everything she has conspicuously chosen not to say, one thing has remained absolutely consistent. There is no version of Graceland's future she is willing to build on the foundation of those upstairs rooms being open to public consumption. People who have worked closely with the Graceland estate in recent years, historians, preservationists, and insiders who have spoken on background to journalists covering the property, have been remarkably unified in their characterization of where things stand. There are no renovation proposals for the upstairs. There are no internal discussions about premium access tours, no exploratory conversations about what a sensitively designed exhibit of the private quarters might look like, no business plans sitting in any drawer that involve a ticket being sold to those rooms. The decision is not pending. It is not under review. It is settled in the way that only decisions made from the deepest place of human grief can ever truly be settled. And when you sit with that reality long enough, something shifts in how you understand the whole story. Because there is a version of this narrative where keeping the upstairs closed looks like denial, like a family so invested in protecting a carefully constructed image that they will sacrifice historical completeness to maintain it. That version has been argued. Critics of the estate have made that case, but the more you examine the actual human beings involved, the 9-year-old girl who grew up in those rooms, the daughter who refused to sell them at the cost of her own financial stability, the granddaughter who buried her mother and her brother and still shows up to carry the weight of it all, the harder it becomes to frame their decision as anything other than an act of love so fierce it has outlasted every person who originally made it. The upstairs of Graceland is not a secret being protected for cynical reasons. It is a sanctuary being protected for human ones. It is the place where Elvis Presley was most himself, most vulnerable, most alive, most broken, most real, and the women who have loved him across 3 generations have looked at the world and made a collective, unspoken, entirely coherent judgment. The world does not deserve that version of him. The world gets the jumpsuits and the gold records and the jungle room and the Cadillac. The world gets the legend. But the man, the actual, complicated, suffering, luminous human being who lived and died on that second floor, his identity, his career, his freedom, and his carefully constructed version of the American dream. And the only way to keep that secret buried was to make absolutely certain that Elvis Presley, the most famous man in the world, never left the country. So why? But here's the question that the settlement didn't answer, and that no court ruling ever could. What does it actually cost a family to fight like this? Not in legal fees, though those were certainly substantial, but in the currency that doesn't appear on any balance sheet. Priscilla Presley raised Lisa Marie. She was there when Lisa Marie was a little girl running through Graceland's halls. She was there through the chaos and the marriages and the very public struggles that defined Lisa Marie's adult life. And Lisa Marie, despite everything, despite the complications and the distances and the unresolved tensions that exist in every family, had once trusted Priscilla enough to name her as co-trustee of her entire estate. That trust was eventually withdrawn, quietly, legally, and finally. And the reasons why it was withdrawn are known only to Lisa Marie herself, who is no longer here to explain them. That silence is the most haunting part of this entire story. Because at its core, this was never really about notarization standards or trust amendment procedures or the technical validity of a signature. It was about a mother who felt erased by her own daughter's final decisions, and a granddaughter who refused to let those decisions be undone. And somewhere between those two positions lives the actual human tragedy of what happened. The grief that curdled into conflict, the love that's expressed itself as litigation, the family that couldn't hold together under the weight of a legacy that was always too large for ordinary people to carry without being changed by it. Elvis built Graceland to be a home, a refuge from the noise, from the crowds, from the relentless machinery of fame. He wanted gates he could close. He wanted a place that belonged to him and the people he loved, insulated from everything outside. And in the cruelest possible irony, Graceland became the very thing he was trying to escape. A public spectacle, a contested symbol, a battlefield where the people who loved him most tore pieces off each other trying to claim it. Riley Keough Presley holds the keys now. She earned them the hardest way imaginable. And Graceland still stands, still breathes, still draws hundreds of thousands of people every year who come to stand on that lawn and feel something they can't quite name. But is it still a home? After everything this family has been through, after the grief and the courtrooms, and the settlements and the silence, that is the one question nobody has answered yet. If this story moved you, hit that like button and let us know in the comments. Whose side were you on? Riley's or Priscilla's? Subscribe for more untold stories behind the world's most legendary names, because the next one is just as shocking. Share this with someone who needs to hear it.